Gayathry Venkiteswaran. I'm the Executive Director of the Southeast Asian Press Alliance. This is a regional network of media freedom groups in Southeast Asia. We have members in 4 countries and partners in another 3 countries. And our work is about promoting and defending press freedom, freedom of expression, access to information. And I would actually reflect on the UN Special Rapporteur on freedom of expression and opinion, Mr. Frank LaRue's presentation, where he actually talks about the access to the internet as a right because of all the other enabling, or because it enables the enjoyment of many other rights. And I think that is actually fundamental because it then allows for education, it allows for employment, it allows for the expression, political expression, so I think that the access to this infrastructure needs to be seen as a right, like how you say right to education. I mean, we have a situation where in Finland it's 100% access. They incorporate the right to have internet access at a particular speed even in their constitution or in their law. And then we have the rest of the world still grappling with the infrastructure. Now that is going to create that kind of gap, economic gap, the kind of social gap. If we look at Article 19 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, where freedom of expression is described as having that access to information, having the right to express across all frontiers, all kinds of media. So if we have rights to the media, then I think the internet can also be seen in that light. I think if we come to an agreement and appreciate the value of the access to the internet as a right, then I think that it needs to be defended as any other rights as well. And the obligation is on the state to be able to provide. The state today provides education that can be controversial in some countries, health, it's obliged to provide that. It's obliged to provide security for its citizens. Then I think that in terms of being able to enjoy that right of access, then I think the obligation is on the state. But this is really something that it does involve a kind of a paradigm shift for a lot of people, including civil society groups, to say that, hey, it's not just about digital divide these days that we want to talk about. It's not just about just the technological issues, but how is the government actually providing access to its citizens? So I would say that the obligation is on the state as other fundamental rights. One of the things about the online platform is that it's actually quite a wild world out there. You also put it rightfully that it's everywhere. It's kind of it's like God, omnipresent in most places. And but at the same time, it's actually not that holy, because it causes a lot of both opportunities and threats and challenges. So I think maybe the first thing to recognize is that if we see it as a problem, we should not say that laws are then the solution. I think that we need to sort of take a break from that approach for now, because as in many other developments of different media, it's not just the laws that have come to sort of calm the situation. It does take change in the way we perceive it, the way we use it. So instead of laws, I think it's actually very important for people to understand how to use it. I think that it really has to be the first step. And there are some areas of genuine sort of security concerns, individual security even, not just national security, where there are already existing laws that are able to cope with the threats. So I think that first is, let's try to see how best we can understand this infrastructure, how can we use it, and how can we use it in a way that does not harm other people. But again, that also, there is a certain limitation where you can express yourself, you can use it. And then I think we need to actually review what is there. So you have all these international treaties and regulations, and then you have the local laws. And I think we need to be very honest and ask if the local laws are actually good. Because I think in some of the cases where foreign companies and corporations that operate in a certain country they are bound by the local laws, and unfortunately they cannot, they don't have much room to negotiate. And a lot of the governments say, well, this is the law of the country, you have to abide. But is the law even good in the first place? I mean, just because the laws are there doesn't mean that it's all, with good intention. So I think we need to have a very, very honest look at what are the laws. And you will find it's not just one or two, but through many, many different laws, how they are able to actually either control the space, limit the use, and criminalize certain activities. So I think the role of civil society, for example, and the academics, maybe just to go back and look at what are these laws that are available in the country, and think about whether some of these need to be changed. And then I think also finding opportunities to somehow aspire for higher standards. I don't want to use the word harmonize, because I don't think that having the same laws everywhere is going to solve, because a lot of problems come from social issues, political issues, particularly political issues. So I think that you need to have some international standards and then see whether these laws are actually up to those standards. So how do we compromise between what is out there internationally and what is there locally? I think first we have to understand what is there locally. And I think with the internet, it has really thrown into our face what actually exists, what instruments actually exist at the disposal of the governments. So it does take, I think, some initiative of the NGOs to try and understand these things, and they have to collaborate with the academics, with the lawyers, and then put it out there as, look, if this is a right, then are these laws actually enabling it or preventing us from enjoying those rights? And then take it the next step and say, these are international standards. Are we in compliance? How far are we away from those standards? A lot of the international standards we find that governments in this region don't comply with because they've not ratified or they've not signed. But I think a global momentum will definitely force some of these to change some of their approaches. Maybe in the context of how discussions are taking place globally in terms of the internet governance. So with the with the Internet Governance Forum, which started I think in 2005, really 2005, 2006, realizing that this is because there's a lot of interconnectivity, so it's really sort of cross-boundary, and there is a need to have some dialogues about how it would have an impact on different societies and how cross-border activities take place online. Even though this is not really a binding platform for states, I think what it has actually provided for is an opportunity for civil society groups to get on board the issues, at least to express some of the concerns. And primarily I think is that it's seen as something of the domain of the technologies and businesses. By having civil society groups participate in these forums, even though we can't really change policies that much, I think we put the freedom of expression and human rights agenda on the topic there. So I think, with the businesses there and the technologies there, we are telling them, guys, you have to think about human rights. Or at least, recognize that some of the work that you do will actually violate human rights. So I think that is actually very, very crucial. And I think in order to, at some point, be able to influence policy, this process is still very important. We really need to get many, many more corporations and, even individual, people who are actually working at the technical levels to see the reach of their work, the kind of impact they have. So while we've not really had, like, for example, major policy recommendations coming and governments can just disregard them, but having that platform to actually talk across all the other groups is very important. And I think we can safely say that the inputs that go into these forums at least are taken by people like the UN Special Rapporteur. These are very good platforms for him to get the kind of feedback and input. And hopefully that message then goes back to the governments in terms of the concerns. So unlike the IGF, there's another body which is the International Telecommunications Union, which is really the binding one, and where all governments are represented. And this is, it goes way back to the sort of broadcasting and telecommunications thing. And now they are going to play a very crucial role, because you see the sort of convergence of all these platforms. And unfortunately, it doesn't have a platform for civil society groups. So what do? You talk here in IGF, but then you know that the one that's making the decision is ITU. So how do we find a way? And I think that actually with the internet issues, we actually need to go back to the national levels. I think governments need to hear from civil society groups about this. At the moment, many of them are very comfortable because civil society groups are not prepared enough to go and question them about spectrum, data, and stuff like that. And so they're very comfortable. They just do what they think is, in their best interest. So I think a lot of us need to go back to our governments and say, we need to talk about this. We need to talk about what you are going to agree at the ITU and actually engage them. So that is missing at the moment. So some people have had the opportunity at the IGF to talk, sort of civil society, government about these things, but many have not had that opportunity. So I think maybe shifting the focus to the national level and engaging governments to talk about the internet rights, internet freedom within the ITU framework. And I think that is maybe what we should really call upon many civil society groups to do, because that's binding. What's going to happen there is binding. And I think as we are developing a sort of more overall policy about the use of the internet, access to the internet, there's a lot of technical issues involved, and I think that we should not be daunted by the technicality of it. I think we should take the challenge and understand the infrastructure, because it is the lack of understanding of the technical infrastructure that has also cost us our freedoms a little bit. By not understanding it, we have not realized that our freedoms are being taken away. So a lot of tools are being used for surveillance, for censorship, for blocking, for tracking, and actually these are violations of our freedoms. And so the less we understand, the more freedoms we are giving away. So I think it's very, very important for us to actually take the trouble, understand the infrastructure, understand the technology behind it, because we have to defend it. So we tend to focus a lot about the content, especially when coming from a media background. It's about political issues, the social issues, environmental issues. Oh, can you talk about it? Can you not talk about it? Or blogger has written something and he's arrested for it. So it's very much on the content front, what comes out. But the back end of it, what is actually happening and how are our rights being taken away, infringed upon, is something we're not looking at. And I think that is something we have to change, because if we don't understand it, then we are not aware of what is actually being taken away from us. Okay? So, yeah.